Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is Explanation of Battle Through the Heavens episode number 137 based on novel. So let's start. The top level of the Pill Tower consisted of an extremely spacious and grand hall. Normally, the great heads of the Pill Tower would only receive guests here when they were VIPs. At this moment, there were some figures randomly seated within this large hall that had been vacated for a long time. A female servant was respectfully pouring tea. Feng Zunja, it has been many years since we have last seen each other. You still have that free and easy manner. Xian Kongzi in the leader's seat looked at a green-clothed, old man with a smile on his face and laughed. The green-clothed, old man was naturally Feng Zunja, who had traveled non-stop from the Falling Star Pavilion after having received Xiao Yang's message. He merely shook his head and laughed after hearing Xian Kongzi's words. How can I be as comfortable as you, a great head? My Falling Star Pavilion is merely a small character when compared to the Pill Tower. There was a somewhat old-fashioned man was seated beside Feng Zunja. His body was rigid. It was as straight as a spear, giving one a kind of sharp feeling. It was as though the one seated was not a person, but a sword that contained a sharp aura. The old me has not left the Pill region for a long time. May I know who this friend is? Xian Kongzi's eyes slid to the old-fashioned man as he asked with a smile. I have long since forgotten my old name. Subsequently, I have created a name for myself, Tai Jian, Metal Sword. This old-fashioned man was polite to Xian Kongzi. He cupped his hands together, and his face revealed a somewhat ugly smile. Tai Jian. Could it be Tian Jian Zunja who washed the Jade Sword Gate in blood 5 years ago? Surprise immediately flashed over Xian Kongzi's face as he asked. The face of the old man Tai Jian moved a little before nodding. Clearly, he did not wish to linger on this topic for long. This old fellow's character is just like this. The enmity between him and the Jade Sword sect is too deep. It is difficult to explain everything in a short time. Feng Zunja laughed and suddenly swept his eyes over the large hall. He asked, where is Xiao Yang? That little fellow has summoned me here. Don't tell me that he is not even going to show himself. What is old Feng saying? How can this member of the younger generation fool an elder like you? A soft laugh was transmitted from outside of the large hall when Feng Zunja's voice had just sounded. Immediately, a couple of figures pushed open the door and slowly walked in. Xiao Yang's eyes focused on Feng Zunja inside the moment he entered the large hall. He immediately sighed in relief. Feng Zunja was absolutely necessary for this operation. Therefore, Xiao Yang felt reassured after having personally seen Feng Zunja in the hall. 9-star Dozong. Feng Zunja swept his eyes over Xiao Yang. The teacup in his hand slightly trembled as he exclaimed in surprise. He clearly remembered that Xiao Yang had only just broken through to the Dozong class when they parted ways. How could Xiao Yang's strength soar to the 9th stars in a little over a year? The face of the stern-looking Tai Jian Zunja by Feng Zunja's side twitched a little. Some shocked flashed across his calm eyes. Feng Zunja had told him in detail about the matters related to Xiao Yang. From the way Feng Zunja had spoken, it was obvious that he was extremely pleased with Yao Chen's disciple. Initially, Tai Jian Zunja had not been so sure about Yao Chen's disciple. However, now that he had looked over Xiao Yang personally, he finally sensed the hidden extraordinariness under this young face. I was merely lucky. Xiao Yang laughed as he walked into the large hall. The little fairy doctor, Tianhua Zunja, and the laser-looking Zi Yang followed behind him. This girl was extremely dissatisfied that Xiao Yang had brought her to meet these old people. Was it not better to allow her to sleep a little longer? Feng Zunja smiled. His eyes shifted before solidifying on the little fairy doctor and Tianhua Zunja without moving. Tai Jian Zunja by the side also revealed a grave expression on his old-fashioned face. His eyes were staring intently at those two. Being an elite Dozun, he was able to sense that this elderly person and woman seemed to possess a strength that was a little stronger than him. Who are these two? Feng Zunja blinked his eyes. From the way he saw it, these two people seemed to have a deep relationship with Xiao Yang. Moreover, the thing that caused him to pay more attention was the strength of the little fairy doctor and Tianhua Zunja. From his senses, these two people had both reached the level of a 3-star Dozun. They are all my friends and will also be helpers during this operation. This is little fairy doctor and this is Tianhua Zunja. Xiao Yang smiled and replied. Even with Feng Zunja's calmness, his heart involuntarily shook a little when he heard Xiao Yang's introduction. He had not seen Xiao Yang for slightly over a year, yet his strength had not only soared to the 9th star but 2 powerful friends with the strength of 3-star Dozuns had appeared beside him. This rapid growth really left one speechless. He is indeed worthy of being a disciple who caught the eye of that old fellow. One really cannot judge him using common sense. Feng Zunja bitterly laughed in his heart. Over a year ago, Xiao Yang was merely a young fellow who had just entered the Central Plains. However, now he had already managed to make a name for himself within the Central Plains. News of that earth-shaking competition during the Pill Gathering had already spread across the entire Central Plains region. Bases on Feng Zunja guess, it was likely that the expressions of the Wind Lightning Pavilion would be quite interesting after hearing the news. A Tier 8 alchemist guru was not someone one could offend. This is Tai Gen Zunja. He is also a helper that I have found. Some of our friends in the past withdrew after hearing that we are planning to oppose the Hall of Souls. I am also unable to use any force. These people have their own factions behind them. They are afraid they might anger the Hall of Souls and that they would retaliate by washing their factions in blood. Feng Zunja sighed. After which, he pointed at Tai Gen Zunja by his side and said, "This Tai Gen Zunja is alone and does not have any relations." Back then, he also owed a great favor to Yao Chen. Otherwise, he would not have been able to avenge his blood feud. He had taken the initiative to follow me when he heard that I was going to rescue Yao Chen. Xiao Yang quietly nodded when he heard this. It seemed that Feng Zunja had been quite active during this period of time. However, the Hall of Souls was too strong. Even Do Zun class experts would not dare to offend them. Nevertheless, Xiao Yang's heart felt some admiration for this Tai Gen Zunja since he was able to step forward and lend his hand. Making a perfect situation more perfect might be unfortunate, but delivering help when it was needed was truly considered a treasure. Xiao Yang shall represent teacher while thanking Tai Gen Zunja for his righteousness. Xiao Yang's expression was grave as he faced Tai Gen Zunja, cupped his hands together, and thanked him. The reason I managed to have my revenge was because of Yao Chen's aid. Now that I have taken my revenge, I do not have anything left to be worried about. As long as that old fellow can escape and allow me to return this big favor, barging into the Hall of Souls is nothing. I also wish to meet those fellows who are neither ghosts nor humans. Tai Gen Zunja's voice was somewhat hoarse as he spoke. Xiao Yang was silent when he heard the tone of this person, which appeared as though he had already tossed aside everything. The kind of people who could randomly toss themselves aside was the most terrifying. Fortunately, this person was standing on their side during this operation. Xian Kongzi has already informed us about the news relating to Yao Chen. I have been finding helpers during this period of time and did not notice that the Hall of Souls had already shifted Yao Chen's prison. Otherwise, we might have ended up alerting them if we charged to Ming City. Feng Zunja fondled his beard and softly commented. However, I did not expect them to transfer him to the Death Soul mountain range. The terrain there is complicated since the cold fog is so dense. If they made a mistake and let someone flee into the deep mountains covered in cold fog, it is likely that even the Hall of Souls would have difficulty finding him. It looks like they are worried that Yao Chen will be rescued by someone. Xiao Yang slightly nodded. He said, "We do not have sufficient time. Moreover, we do not know if the Hall of Souls will receive some news and quietly transfer teacher away. If that happens, all of our effort will be wasted. We must indeed quickly resolve such a matter. Otherwise things may change if more time elapses." Feng Zunji nodded in agreement. After which, he looked to Xiao Yang and asked, "When do you plan to leave?" "We'll leave tomorrow." Xiao Yang replied in a deep voice. Currently, all the helpers had been gathered. Adding Feng Zunja and Tai Gen Zunja, their group already possessed 5 Do Zuns. Adding Xiao Yang's explosive fighting strength, they would be able to fight against 6 Do Zuns. This lineup was already quite strong within the Central Plains. As long as no unexpected changes occurred, Xiao Yang felt a 70% confidence that he would be able to rescue Yao Laro from the hands of the Hall of Souls. Feng Zunja was slightly startled when he heard Xiao Yang's departure time. After which, he slowly nodded. He was similarly aware that this kind of thing should not be delayed for too long. Although leaving tomorrow might appear a little rushed, speed was important in a battle. They could catch the Hall of Souls off guard, snatch the person, and swiftly leave. By the time the experts from the Hall of Souls hurried over, they would only be able to stare at the situation. In that case, we will do as you say and leave tomorrow. Xian Kongzi was also startled as he looked at Xiao Yang and Feng Zunja, who had swiftly decided the time they would act. He helplessly nodded as he stood up and said, "Since all of you have already decided, the old me shall wish all of you a successful operation. We'll receive old Xian's auspicious words." Xiao Yang laughed. A stern glint suddenly surged into his dark black eyes. He had worked so hard for so many years for this day. Now, it was finally time for him to act. "Teacher, wait for disciple. This time around, I will definitely rescue you from the hands of the Hall of Souls." When the first ray of sunlight cut through the darkness and landed on the ground the next day, a couple of figures quietly rushed out of the pill tower without attracting anyone's attention. They disappeared into the sky within a couple of flashes. Wind sounded on the top of a mountain outside of Holy Pill City. A couple of figures appeared from empty space before landing on the mountain peak. "Let's go." Xiao Yang counted them. His expression was instantly covered with stern seriousness. With a low cry, his body was the first to turn into a blurry black line that shot into the distant sky in a lightning-like fashion. After which, Feng Zunja, the little fairy doctor, and the rest closely followed. The rescue mission had finally begun at this moment. The Death Soul mountain range was located at the northwestern region of the Central Plains. This place could also be considered one of the more dangerous places within the Central Plains. It was rumored that many big battles had erupted in this place a long time ago. An unknown number of skeletons were buried under the soil of the mountain range. Moreover, due to this place having an extremely dense natural cold chi, it had resulted in this mountain range being covered by a cold fog all year round. One's spiritual strength would even be affected deep within this kind of cold fog. A reckless person might even be trapped to death within this mountain range. The Death Soul mountain range was not very far from the Pill region. With the speed of Xiao Yang's group, they were able to reach it in around 5 days' time. After having begun their journey, Xiao Yang's group did not have many stops along the way. They basically continued traveling through the night and day. Under this craziness, the group had already sensed the surrounding temperature beginning to swiftly fall on the afternoon of the 4th day. Are we about to arrive? Xiao Yang raised his head. His eyes looked into the distance. There was the outline of a mountain range there. However, the exterior of the mountain range was covered by a layer of icy cold fog. Xiao Yang's tensed face relaxed a little as he looked at the mountain range, which appeared a little sinister under the cover of the cold fog. They had finally reached the Death Soul mountain range. With their target within close proximity, Xiao Yang waved his hand and slowly landed towards a mountain top within a mountain range. We have arrived at the Death Soul mountain range. However, everyone should recuperate a little first. The traveling during this period of time has not been easy. Xiao Yang landed on the mountain top. He looked at little fairy doctor and the rest, who had closely followed behind, and smilingly said. Zi Yang immediately sat down on the grass below upon hearing Xiao Yang's words. Her pretty face was filled with bitterness. The traveling these few days was really about to take her little life. Is this the Death Soul mountain range? Little fairy doctor lifted her eyes and looked at the mountain range in the distance that was covered by a cold fog. She softly asked, can we directly fly into it? No. The cold fog outside is still alright. However, the further one ventured into it, the denser it would be. If we end up losing our direction at that time, we will end up losing our way inside. Moreover, those cold fog possess quite a number of mysterious magical beasts. It will be very easy for us to be ambushed. Feng Zunjia looked into the distance and replied. Moreover, this Death Soul mountain range has a branch hall of the Hall of Souls. No one can guarantee that they do not have some defensive precautions here. It is extremely easy to be discovered if we charge in from the sky. In terms of the familiarity of the central plains, it was likely that no one else present could be compared with Feng Zunjia. Moreover, he was also extremely experienced and was far better than Xiao Yang and the rest in this aspect. Hence, no one doubted his words. All of them nodded instead. This current season can be considered to be the time when the cold fog of the Death Soul mountain range is at its densest. However, we do not have the time to wait until the cold fog becomes thinner. Therefore, we can only enter with this fog. Feng Zunjia narrowed his eyes slightly. His gaze swept over the Death Soul mountain range as he said, there are some smaller sects and factions around the Death Soul mountain range. From what I know, most of these factions are controlled by the Hall of Souls. Therefore, we must not allow anyone to discover our trail when we enter. If someone unfortunately sees us, leave it to me. Taijian Zunjia by the side spoke in a hoarse voice. Feng Zunjia nodded quietly. This operation of theirs was really too important. Anyone who ended up knocking into them could only blame himself for being unlucky. Everyone recuperated for around half an hour on the mountain top. After which, they stood up in unison. They looked at each other and could see a seriousness within the other party's eyes. The strength of the Hall of Souls was something that everyone present were clearly aware of. It was not as easy matter to rescue someone from their hands. If this operations fails, it is likely that we will no longer have such an opportunity in the future. Therefore, no matter what, we must rescue Yao Chen this time around. Feng Zunjia had a grave face as he spoke in a deep voice. Everyone nodded gently upon hearing this. Everyone should remain close after entering the mountain range. Be careful. Let's go. After saying these words, Feng Zunjia took the lead to move. He became just like a large bird that glided down from the mountain top. After which, he rushed into the vast forest covered by a cold fog. Xiao Yang and the others followed closely behind. White fog covered the entirety of one's sight within the forest that was permeated by a cold fog. Visibility was extremely low in this kind of environment. Even if one used one's spiritual perception, one could only sense the area within 100 meters or so around. It was impossible to extend any further. The waves of low and deep monster roar that occasionally sounded within the forest that was covered with white fog suddenly had some slight rushing wind sound appearing. Immediately, a couple of agile monkey-like figures broke through the cold fog. They rushed forward and swiftly headed towards the deep regions of the mountain range. As they entered deeper into the mountain range, Xiao Yang and the others also gradually met with some trouble. The size of the Death Soul mountain range was extremely large. Additionally, cold fog permeated the place. It was not easy to find the location of the Hall of Souls from within it. The map that Xian Kongzi had given them was of some use initially. However, as they ventured deeper into the mountain range, the use of it became increasingly less. At the end, Xiao Yang's group could only rely on their own ability to gradually search this place. By advancing and searching in this manner, their speed was naturally reduced. Moreover, the thing that really caused one to feel depressed was that the effect obtained was not great. This season was when the cold fog of the Death Soul mountain range was at its peak. Some of the indicators on the map were also destroyed by this cold fog. It was likely that Xian Kongzi and the others had not expected this. After advancing and searching for a period of time, Feng Zunja noticed the cold fog around them gradually becoming dark. He involuntarily frowned slightly and softly said, "Night will arrive soon. We cannot continue traveling. The magical beast within the Death Soul mountain range are extremely fierce at night. Moreover, they are just like the maggots in one's bones and are extremely difficult to shake of. If any unusual movement was created, it would not only disturb the other magical beast but it would likely also attract the attention of the experts from the Hall of Souls." Xiao Yang hesitated for a moment upon hearing this, but he could only nod his head. Feng Zunja's experience was far from what he could compare with. It was definitely right to listen to him. Feng Zunja made a hand signal to Taijian Zunja when he saw that no one had any objections. The latter nodded and swung his hand. Some black stuff rushed out from it and flew into the distance. "These are the stool of some high-rank magical beast. It is able to stop some magical beast from disturbing us. Everyone should rest for tonight. We will continue searching tomorrow. The branch hall of the Hall of Souls will definitely be quite big. Although this mountain range is very large, it is only a matter of time before we find it." Feng Zunja softly comforted. Xiao Yang laughed bitterly. His heart felt a little depressed. Currently, they were fully prepared but they were unable to find their way after arriving at the site. This was really a little comical. Although Xiao Yang felt depressed in his heart, he did not say anything. He sat down on a tree branch and slowly shut his eyes. The other people, who had traveled for so long, also shut their eyes and rested a little. The night of the Death Soul mountain range was exceptionally dark and cool. Various howls resounded within the mountains. This caused one to feel one's paws stand. Beast roars resounded for over half a night within the mountain range before gradually disappearing. Just when everyone were about to sigh in relief, they suddenly heard some shuffling sound being transmitted from the distance. Feng Zunja, who had his eyes tightly shut, suddenly opened them when these sound appeared. His eyes swept over the distant white fog. After which, his face changed a little as he exclaimed, "This is bad. It's the stone swallowing ant colony." Upon hearing the exclamation from Feng Zunja, the expressions of Xiao Yang, Tai Jian and the rest also changed slightly. Stone swallowing ant colony. It was a kind of extremely frightening magical beast within the Death Soul mountain range. This was not due to their strength but because they possessed terrifying numbers that could amount to tens of millions. The fierce reputation of the Death Soul mountain range was partially as a result of the cold fog. However, most of it was because this Death Soul mountain range had a kind of magical beast. This type of magical beast was the stone-swallowing demon ant. This stone-swallowing demon ant was not of a high rank. They were merely rank 3 or 4. However, the frightening aspect of them was their numbers. This kind of terrifying ant tide that numbered to the tens of millions would swarm over from all directions. Even a rank 8 magical beast could only temporarily hide. Moreover, this kind of stone-swallowing demon ant could swallow any flesh and blood that blocked them. Anywhere within the Death Soul mountain range where the stone-swallowing demon ant tide passed would be covered with densely white bones. It was not possible to find even a trace of blood. Any expert who had accidentally entered the mountain range and meet this kind of ant colony would be no different from meeting certain death. If it was not because these stone-swallowing demon ant could only exist within the cold fog, it was likely that no one would dare to even live outside of this mountain range. The reason that the fierce reputation of the Death Soul mountain range would gradually spread over these years was largely credited to these terrifying ant colony. Xiao Yang's group had never expected that they would be so unlucky. They had met this kind of troublesome thing just after having entered the Death Soul mountain range. Prepare to withdraw. Do not engage in a head-on collision with these damn things. Feng Zunja quickly got up and spoke in a deep voice. Xiao Yang and the rest did not dare to slight the situation upon seeing the solemn expression of Feng Zunja. They hurriedly got up and were preparing to withdraw when a lovely little figure suddenly rushed down from the tree. After which, she charged into the forest that was covered by a cold fog. Feng Zunja's expression changed drastically upon seeing this action of Zi Yang. He involuntarily cried out furiously, "What is this girl doing? Is she seeking death? All of you should leave first. I will rescue her." Wait, the voices of the ants had come to a halt. Little fairy doctor's eyebrows were vertical as she suddenly said. Feng Zunja and the rest were also startled when they heard this. They listened carefully and did indeed realize that the shuffling sound, which left one's heart cold, had already completely disappeared. Just when Feng Zunja and the rest had a stunned expression, a lovely little figure rushed out from the cold fog without being hurt. After which, the one who appeared on a tree was Zi Yang, who had just ran out by herself earlier. At this moment, a half-a-foot large golden-colored 8-winged large ant was on her shoulder. Stone-swallowing ant queen? Feng Zunja's and Taijian Zunja's expressions immediately changed slightly when they saw that gold-colored 8-winged large ant. Zi Yang merely laughed in face of the drastic change of the expressions of Feng Zunja's group. Let's go. This big fellow knows where the Hall of Souls is located. Feng Zunja and the rest were immediately stunned upon hearing Zi Yang's words. They saw the docile manner of the stone-swallowing ant queen that was rumored to be incomparably fierce, and their hearts seemed to have understood something. Their eyes looked at Zi Yang in a strange manner before softly speaking, "The old me really has terrible eyesight. It is unexpected that this little girl is also someone who hides her skills." Xiao Yang smiled. He was much better as compared to the shock that Feng Zunja and the others face. Zi Yang's identity was something that he was already clearly aware of. The ancient void dragon was known to reign supreme amongst all beasts. The pressure that originated from the bloodlines did indeed possess a kind of unknown deterrence towards these low-rank magical beasts. Due to Zi Yang, the originally tensed atmosphere had suddenly become relaxed. Xiao Yang's body moved and he appeared a short distance from Zi Yang. His eyes curiously observed the so-called stone-swallowing ant queen. The ant queen was dark golden colored. There were 8 onion skin-like wings on its back. Its enormous mouth had serrated sharp teeth that caused one to feel a chillness in one's heart. If one was bitten by this thing, it was likely that he would end up with quite a miserable fate. While Xiao Yang was observing this stone-swallowing ant queen, the latter also appeared to have sensed him. Its 8 wings were flapped slightly as it revealed its ferocious large mouth that was covered with sharp teeth towards Xiao Yang. There is no need to be afraid, no need to be afraid. Zi Yang's small hand patted the ant queen. Only then did the latter felt a little more secured. However, those eyes of it still contained a fierce glint when looking towards Xiao Yang. This kind of magical beast was extremely fierce and brutal. If it was not because it was suppressed by Zi Yang's dragon might, it was likely that it would have become violent and injure someone. This thing knows where the Hall of Souls is located. Feng Zunjie also floated over. He spoke with some joy after glancing at the ant queen. Yes. Zi Yang nodded. After which, she glanced at Xiao Yang and said, "Should we get moving now?" Xiao Yang mused for a moment. He exchanged glances with Feng Zunjie before nodding. Speed was valued in battle. They had already roamed this forest for a period of time. If they continued to stop, they would sooner or later be discovered by those from the Hall of Souls. "Follow me." Zi Yang began moving after seeing this situation. She took the lead in rushing towards the mountain range that was permeated by cold fog. Xiao Yang and the others hurriedly followed from behind. This time around, the speed of Xiao Yang's group had clearly been raised significantly with the ant queen leading them. Moreover, their attention need not be diverted to find their path. Hence, after less than half an hour, they had ventured deep into the mountain belly. Zi Yang, who was leading the way through the forest that was covered by cold fog in front, suddenly stopped. She indicated for Xiao Yang's group not to make any noise. Although Xiao Yang's group felt some uncertainty when they saw this, they still remained quiet as they were told. Their eyes cautiously swept around them. After everyone became quiet, the ant queen on Zi Yang's back suddenly emitted a slight strange sonic wave. After which, this sonic wave spread like a ripple. A few seconds after this sonic wave was emitted, Xiao Yang's group discovered numerous black figures falling down from the surrounding cold fog. After which, they landed on the shriveled yellow grass. Their bodies were covered with fist-size black-colored ants. These ants firmly bite on their throats, completely blocking their voices. The eyes of the entire group looked over, only to be surprised to discover that these black figures were actually palm-sized small black birds. The size of these birds were very small and they were hidden within the cold fog. Even with Xiao Yang's perception, he had never discovered them. These are the eyes of the Hall of Souls. As long as there is any activity, they will use sound waves to transmit informations. If we do not completely eliminate them, our trail will be captured by the Hall of Souls. Zi Yang explained to Xiao Yang's group. Xiao Yang and the rest involuntarily emitted some cold sweat when they heard this. This Hall of Souls was indeed strange. They had actually groomed these small things to be their eyes. How can an ordinary person expect this? If it was not because of the ant queen leading them this time around, it was likely that the Hall of Souls would have already set a trap for them to jump into by the time they reached the branch hall. The communication birds nearby has already been quietly removed by the stone-swallowing demon ants. There is no need to be worried. Additionally, the Hall of Souls is a short distance away. All of you should be careful, Zi Yang spoke softly. The hearts of Xiao Yang's group tensed upon hearing her words. Doqi began to quietly circulate within their bodies as they prepared to handle all sudden situations anytime. After finishing off these hidden eyes of the Hall of Souls, Zi Yang once again led the way. They continued to transverse through the mountain range in this manner for around 10 minutes or so before she finally came to a stop. After which, she sighed softly and whispered, "We have arrived." Xiao Yang's footsteps suddenly became faster when he heard this. Only then did he discover that the fog here had actually become much thinner for some unknown reason. The spot where they were currently located was an extremely tall and steep slope. At the end of this slope was a large valley with its 4 sides facing the mountains. The interior of the valley was a 1,000 feet large black hall. It was just like a prostrating prehistoric fierce beast that was spreading a terrifying aura that chilled one's heart within the darkness. This is the Hall of Souls. Xiao Yang involuntarily inhaled a breath of cool air as he looked at the incomparably large building within the valley. This Hall of Souls was actually able to create such a big thing within this deep secluded mountain forest. They were indeed quite powerful. Feng Zunjie and the rest also walked over from behind Xiao Yang. They glanced at the large black hall within the valley and an excitement surged into their eyes. At the same time, some seriousness also appeared in them. Next, it would be the time where they truly battle it out. Wait, a spatial barrier has been placed in this place. Xiao Yang gradually recovered his calmness. Suddenly he discovered that the sky above the valley a short distance away had some distortion. He immediately frowned and softly said, "Leave the spatial barrier to me. I am able to tear it open without alerting those inside," Zi Yang said. "Old Feng, Can you sense just how many elite Dozuns are present inside this large hall? Xiao Yang nodded slightly before turning his head and asking Feng Zunja. Feng Zunja shut his eyes. A moment later, he opened them and softly said, "The information is right. I sense 5 hidden auras. Clearly, they are all Dozun class experts. I have also sensed more than 10 Dozongs. There are also quite a number of even weaker auras." Xiao Yang's heart quietly sighed in relief upon hearing this. 5 Dozuns. This lineup might be extremely powerful, but they were at the very least able to deal with it. When the spatial barrier is opened, we will first release some stone-swallowing demon and into it and bite all those fellows to death. The excited manner of Zi Yang by the side caused Xiao Yang and the rest to become speechless. She was really a little monster. 5 Dozuns. The 4 of us can barely block them. Xiao Yang shall take the opportunity to enter the Hall of Souls and find Yao Chen. Take him away immediately after you find him. We cannot stay for long. No one can guarantee whether the Hall of Souls will have any swift reinforcements. Feng Zunja spoke in a deep voice. You will not be only able to barely block them once you include this. Xiao Yang smiled. He flicked his finger and the sky demon puppet appeared beside him. Its dark golden body was not easily discovered under the cover of the fog. This is a Dozun class puppet. Feng Zunja and Tai Jian Zunja had a change in their expressions when they saw the sky demon puppet. Their hearts were greatly shaken. It was difficult to imagine that the strength around Xiao Yang had actually become this great during this 1 year plus time. Alright, with this puppet, we will be able to completely delay the 5 Dozuns from the Hall of Souls. The matter of finding Yao Chen will be left to you. Xiao Yang's expression was grave as he nodded. After which, he lifted his chin towards Zi Yang. The latter nodded knowingly. She took 2 steps forward. A purple light lingered over her finger as she gently pressed it on the distorted space, cutting a 10 feet large spacious door. She pushed with her hand and the space quietly turned into nothingness. An invisible spatial door appeared in front of Xiao Yang's group eyes. Go! The Ant Queen on Zi Yang's shoulders once again emitted a strange sonic wave after the spatial door was opened. Immediately, Xiao Yang's group heard the shuffling sound being transmitted over. After which, the skin on their heads became numb as they saw densely packed black ants swarm over from the forest like floodwaters. Finally, they surged past Xiao Yang's group and rushed into the spatial door. Under the cover of the faint cold fog, this wave of black ants followed the slope and quickly rushed towards the large black hall within the valley. Attack! Regardless of how frightening the Hall of Souls is, we will enact a good show of snatching food from a tiger's mouth this time around. Xiao Yang laughed when he saw the ant tide surging into the valley. He suddenly stood up. A sharp aura slowly spread from within his body. After which, he took the lead to stride into the spatial barrier. The rescue operation that he had prepared for so many years had finally truly begun at this moment. There was an enormous square deep within the large black hall. 1,000 feet large black stone pillars stood on the square while appearing to support the sky. The stone pillar was covered with countless number of strange symbols. Numerous dark black chains were extended from the stone pillars. They crossed and outlined the midair of the square. The end of these metal chains had numerous weak light clusters suspended over them. Within them were surprisingly some illusory spiritual bodies with painful expressions. The middle territory of this square was a platform that was around 100 feet from the ground. The surroundings of the platform had 4 enormous stone pillars. 4 tight thick black chains meandered like pythons. The end of the 4 chains was an extremely intense light cluster. There was an elderly soul who was seated with his eyes shut within the light cluster. From the looks of it, he was surprisingly Yao Laro, who had fallen into the hands of the Hall of Souls. At this moment, 4 strange black chains lingered over the limbs of Yao Laro like a vine. It caused him to be unable to move even a little. A deathly silence and strangeness covered this entire square. This place was completely filled with a dark denseness and deathly scent. This silence continued for a period of time before Yao Laro on the platform suddenly opened his tightly shut eyes. At this moment, a trace of extremely familiar aura had appeared within his senses. The appearance of this aura directly caused Yao Laro to be stunned. A moment later, he inhaled a deep breath of air and slowly raised his head. Those pair of eyes that had been dry for a long time had some moisture surging it at this moment. When he had left back then, this aura was still that of a tender young man who required his protection. Now, however, this aura had already grown to such an extent. The young eagle back then had finally soared to the sky at this moment. A slight quiet shuffling sound appeared within the quiet mountain valley. A black torrent rolled down the slope. The speed of the flow was extremely rapid. Within less than half a minute, it had already approached the surroundings of the enormous hall that sat within the mountain valley. One could vaguely see some seated black figures on some stone pillars around the large black hall. These figures lingered within the black fog. A dense dark aura spread as it swallowed and spat. As the torrent swiftly approached, a human figure that was completely wrapped within a black fog suddenly let out a shocked exclamation. The black fog rippled and revealed a somewhat pale face. He frowned and looked at the dark black things which were spreading like black water a short distance away. He was initially startled before a horror surged into his eyes. He hurriedly stood up and cried out sternly, "Be careful. It's the stone-swallowing demon ants. How did these things get in here?" The stern cry that suddenly sounded directly broke the silence of the valley. Over a dozen black fog figures hurriedly got up. Their expressions were stunned as they looked at the blackened tide that swiftly surged over. Sound the warning. A black figure cried out in a deep voice. Soon after, a sharp sonic wave was emitted from his mouth. After which, it was swiftly transmitted into the large hall that appeared like a giant prehistoric beast. This warning that had just been emitted when quite a number of black figures continuously rushed out from the huge hall. Their expressions changed when they saw the ant tide that came from all directions. Everyone, we'll attack together and eliminate all of these things. Do not interrupt the rest of the honorable elders. A black-clothed person, who appeared to have quite a high position, frowned and looked at the ant tide below. After which, he cried out in a deep voice. Understood, Protector Liu. The 100 black figures that had gathered below responded in unison after hearing this. Immediately, numerous strange black fog surged out from their bodies. After which, they swiftly spread towards the ant tide. A white fog erupted from the body of many stone-swallowing demon ants when they made contact. Immediately, it was swiftly eroded by the black fog. However, the numbers in the ant tide was really too terrifying. Even though the black fog was dense, it was still difficult to block the ants' attacking momentum. The frown of the black-clothed person in the sky, who was called Protector Liu, became even tightly. This valley had the spatial barrier placed by the honorable elders. How could these things barge in? What happened? Why is there such a great activity? While Protector Liu was frowning, a couple of black figures came rushing out from within the large hall. They had just posed the question when they saw the stone-swallowing demon ants surging over from all directions. Their expressions immediately changed. Stone-swallowing demon ants. How did they barge in? A dark and solemn-looking man knitted his brows. His eyes suddenly swept over this valley and an uneasiness suddenly rose in his heart. He cried in a deep voice, "Something's wrong, everyone be." Bang! He had yet to finish speaking when the space around him suddenly became distorted. Immediately, a ruthlessly flame formed an invisible handprint that forcefully crushed him into a cluster of meat. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Within an instant, a person had turned into a cluster of blurry pile of meat. Those couple of Hall of Souls protectors recovered only a moment later from such a sudden change. A shocked expression immediately surged onto their faces. Sharp scream resounded within the valley. A screech had just sounded when a sharp sword aura suddenly rushed down from the sky. After which, they shot through the two Hall of Souls protectors with lightning-like speed and brought about a sharp scream. The sword aura also slashed through some stone pillars outside of the large hall. Bang! The sharp sword aura had just fell when the space became slightly distorted. Immediately, a couple of figures slowly surfaced in front of the many experts from the Hall of Souls. After which, a vast and mighty aura erupted without being held back at this moment. Bang! 4 Dozun experts erupted at the same time. The aura directly caused sand and stone to fly within the valley. A powerful pressure spread from the sky and caused the expressions of some experts from the Hall of Souls to change drastically. "Ha ha, you bastards from the Hall of Souls. It is time you pay your debt today." A loud laughter sounded in the sky. Immediately, a couple of vast and mighty wind rushed down from the sky. After which, it forcefully slammed over a dozen experts from the Hall of Souls into the soil. The terrifying force had destroyed all of them at that instant until they scattered to the winds. "Ha ha, charge." A couple of figures rushed down from the sky. They were just like tigers entering a sheep herd. Even those protectors, who usually acted high and mighty, could only hurriedly withdraw in shock in the face of this wolf and tiger-like fierce group. They had never expected that there would actually be someone bold enough to take the initiative in attacking their Hall of Souls. "You dare cause trouble in my Hall of Souls? Are you seeking death?" The continuously screech that resounded over the valley had finally attracted the attention of the honorable elders within the hall. Immediately, a furious roar sounded. Soon after, 5 figures, who were covered with killing aura, rushed out from within the large hall. Their eyes swept over the place before finally pausing on Xiao Yang. "Xiao Yang, you haven't died." Xiao Yang involuntarily raised his head upon hearing this familiar voice. He looked at the 5 figures in the sky. Purple-brown flames surged out from his hand and he grabbed an expert from the Hall of Souls before burning him into nothingness. After which, he laughed faintly. "Old demon Muji Yu, it is unexpected that you are also here. You have come for Yao Chen, right? It must be said that the courage of your group is really boundaryless. You actually dare to snatch someone from my Hall of Souls? This is the first time the old me has met with such a thing after becoming an honorable elder." A black-clothed person lifted the doping above his head and spoke in a dark voice. From the looks of his appearance, he was old Muji Yu. TSK, it is unexpected that there is a familiar person. Fengzunja, you have really not given up. A black-clothed Dozun suddenly laughed in a dark and cold manner beside old Muji Yu. Fengzunja laughed faintly upon hearing this. He glanced at the anti-tide that had already surged into the large hall before turning his head to Xiao Yang and said, "Go in and find Yao Chen. We will delay them." "Yes." Xiao Yang nodded. His body moved and he rushed into the large hall. "You actually dare randomly charge around my Hall of Souls? You are seeking death." The 5 Dozuns from the Hall of Souls in the sky immediately cried out coldly upon seeing this. A Dozun directly tossed out a vast and mighty black fog. This fog was just like a black snake that whizzed through the sky and rushed towards Xiao Yang. "Go. Feng Zunji's figure surfaced beside Xiao Yang. He clenched his hand and a wild wind suddenly appeared. After which, it forcefully shattered the majestic black fog. He cried out in a deep voice. Today, the few of us shall see whether your group has this qualification. The couple of Dozuns laughed angrily. After which, they rushed down swiftly. One of them was separated from the others and he collided with Feng Zunji while carrying a sharp killing aura all over his body. Both parties immediately erupted into a fiery hot battle. Xiao Yang's body moved upon seeing this. After which, he rushed down the midair. His body transformed into a black line that swiftly rushed towards the large hall. Just when it was about to enter the large door, the space in front of them wiggled and an old man in pale purple-colored robes appeared in front of them without any expression. You are Xiao Yang? Do you still remember this venerable self? The purple-clothed old man looked at Xiao Yang in an expressionless manner and asked. Xiao Yang narrowed his eyes. He could sense a familiar feeling from the other party. You are that old bastard who had destroyed by spiritual strength twice. Xiao Yang smiled as he finally remembered. When his spiritual strength had twice arrived at the Hall of Souls after having broken through his class, he was discovered by this old fellow and was expelled from the hall by the latter. The old me has underestimated you. Within a short couple of years you have actually trained until the 9-star Dozong level. Unfortunately, however, you have come to the Hall of Soul to snatch someone. It is fated that you will be forever buried here. The expression of the purple-clothed old man turned dark and cold. His voice had just sounded when his sleeves suddenly fluttered. His footsteps quickly took 2 steps back and purple-brown flame surged out from his palm. The do chi within his body was suddenly spluttered out without being held back at this moment. Bang! Xiao Yang did not directly withdraw this time around. Sharp palm wind that was accompanied by the purple-brown 3000 lotus heart flame ruthlessly collided with that palm from the purple-clothed Do Zun. Frightening wind swept out as the two collided. It shook the surrounding few Hall of Souls guards nearby until they turned into nothingness. That enormous stone pillar also had numerous cracked lines over it. Clatter, clatter. Although Xiao Yang had circulated the Do Chi within his body to the maximum and he even had the 3000 lotus heart flame, he still ended up taking over 10 steps back before stabilizing his body. His brows were knitted. An elite Dozun was indeed strong. Compared with the frown of Xiao Yang, the expression of the purple-clothed Dozun was especially ugly. There was a faint shock within his eyes. When Xiao Yang's spiritual strength had secretly sneaked into the Hall of Souls for the first time back then, all this Dozun needed to do was to think about it and his spiritual strength had been scattered. On the second time, he needed to reveal himself and attack in order to destroy that spiritual strength. However, on this third time, Xiao Yang was actually able to rely on his own Dozong strength to fight his palm head-on without being injured. This kind of soaring-like transformation caused a faint chillness to involuntarily surge in his heart. No matter how great you are, this place will be the place you die today. Murderous intent surged within the eyes of the purple-clothed Dozun as he inhaled a deep breath of air. Xiao Yang was able to receive one attack by him, but he did not believe that the former would really be able to escape from his hand. This thought flashed across the heart of the purple-clothed Dozun as his body moved. After which, he transformed into a lightning that once again rushed towards Xiao Yang. Just when his body had just moved, a dark golden figure descended from the sky like a metal tower. It landed in front of Xiao Yang and blocked this attack of the purple-clothed Dozun. Your opponent is not me. It's it. Xiao Yang faced the purple-clothed Dozun and smiled. Silver glow flashed under his feet as he directly took the opportunity to sneak into the interior of the large hall. The purple-clothed Dozun wanted to block him, but the sky demon puppet in front of him caused him to be afraid of being distracted. Immediately, he cried out furiously. Protectors of the Hall of Souls, stop that brat. I don't care if he's dead or alive. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.